Do you want to run Mac apps on your iPad? This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is supported by Headspace. Meditation made simple. Visit headspace.com/MacVoices for a free 1-month trial. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. And folks, as usual, this is MacVoices Live on Tuesday night. It is 8 p.m. Eastern, or a little bit after. It is 5 p.m. Pacific, or a little after. At least that's where it is where we are. I don't know what it is where you are. And I hope you are joining us live. And if you are not, that's fine. You're seeing this in the feed, and you can join us live on YouTube anytime we do this. So you can throw your questions or comments in. We love to have the chat room involved. And it seems like that's picking up a little bit. So chat room, please welcome. Good to see you. And please throw your comments and thoughts in. We appreciate them. We try to address them whenever possible and whenever they aren't too rude, which for this show, that's a pretty low bar. Tonight, we're going to just do sort of a pickup topic. I asked the panel to throw some topics, what they wanted to talk about tonight, and we got quite a diverse set. So we will introduce those topics as we go along. But first, I want to introduce the people that will be talking about them. So I'm taking my screen, as I always do, and that means that Brittany Smith is up first, again at the top. Brittany, welcome.
Ooh. Thank you for having me, Chuck. I'm excited to see what madness ensues. That's the word.
Is inspired or ensues, Brittany?
It's ensues, not inspired, but you know.
Okay. Jeff Gamet is here as well, and he inspires lots of things. Jeff, how are you?
I'm well, and for whatever it is that I'm inspiring, I should probably just apologize up front.
I'll accept that.
It seems reasonable.
All right, good. David Ginsburg is beside him on my screen. David, good to have you as always.
It's always great to be here. Yes, this will be some good discussion and lots going on this week. So why not? Let's talk about it.
We never know what's going to happen next. Guy Serle is here as well, and he was telling us about some of his disturbing dreams earlier, and we won't get into that now. But yeah,
I'm beside myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
No,
right
Guy, I think you're just having vision problems.
Who said that?
Or you're still chasing those trucks. I'm not sure which.
DDT trucks.
Jim Ray is here with a very calm, sedate-looking background. Is that real, or is that a background image?
Oh, it's a picture I took of my backyard, but it's not really behind me right now.
Okay. Well, close enough. It looks very peaceful, Jim.
It's right over there.
Okay. Last but not least, the man with the biggest microphone we have ever seen, Mr. Jay Miller. Jay, how are you?
Well, you know what they say, the bigger the microphone.
Oh, gosh.
The bigger the boom?
The bigger the hair.
I don't want to talk about hair.
So we have to address a little bit of that. We were talking pre-show. I get so many emails about Jay's microphone. People seem to think that it is a normal microphone with a windscreen that is like right up against his camera. And in fact, Jay, it is not. It is, there you go.
It is a big holder for a much smaller microphone.
And
is that a blue?
Yeah, it's a blue bottle.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. And I assume that is for acoustic reasons.
Yeah, if people haven't noticed, we have a pack of dogs that live between the 3 houses, including mine. So my 2 dogs, my neighbor's 2 dogs, and my new neighbor's 2 dogs. They like to get out in the afternoon and serenade the people as they walk by.
Okay.
So that's like a sound isolator.
Well, we haven't noticed, so it's working.
Exactly. Yep. Brought to you by the fine folks at Chaotica Eyeball.
Yeah. So there you go, folks. Now we have the story on Jay's microphone. So I love your emails, but stop asking the same question. Now you have your answer.
Also, you could email me. You don't have to email Chuck for all of my stuff. Unless you're sending me bills, then yeah, send those to Chuck.
Oh, thank you, Jay. Thank you. Throw me right under the bus. And right on time, we have one more panelist joining us. Mr. Andrew Orr is here from the Mac Observer. Andrew, welcome. Right on time. Good job.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Good to be here.
Yeah, you got here just in time for the introduction. So nice job.
Awesome.
Nice job. So again, I have a list of topics that our friends here submitted, and so I'm going to take them in no particular order. But I am going to give Jim Ray the top billing here because he was the first one to respond. And Jim, you felt like, I guess, we did not cover or dig into running iOS apps on Mac, the Mac OS on iPad enough last week, and I definitely want to give you time to make your case.
Well, I'm not saying we didn't cover it enough last week. That wasn't the topic last week. But I was just, saying that could be, I noticed that in the ensuing week, I saw, a bunch of the RSS feeds that I read that kept getting, a lot of people kept mentioning it, like, wow, this new iPad looks great. Too bad the software, isn't up to what the hardware is up to, and gosh, it would be nice if we could run macOS apps on it. And it's got a it now has the M1 processor. You can get it with 16 gigabytes of RAM and 2 terabytes of storage, so basically the same as the most M1 Mac. The hardware spec is exactly the same. So, could Apple do that?
I'm sure they probably already have.
I'm sure they have too. What I was thinking is one way that I think could be done in sort of a reasonable way would be, I'm sure many of you have used VNC apps on your iPads to control a Mac. So what if you had an app like that, but instead of VNCing to another computer, you just VNC and the screen shows you a virtual Mac screen, but the Mac, the processing is actually being done on the same computer. So if you've got like the Magic Keyboard set up, it would be kind of awkward if you didn't have a pointing device, but iPads have pointing devices now. I think that would be kind of a nice thing. Not that you'd want to run your iPad that way all the time. I can't imagine that they would, boot it into Mac OS like
Why not?
Boot Camp. But just run it as an app that you could switch to on your iPad, and then if you had some Mac app that, and I don't think that would be any more awkward than it is now. They allow you to run iOS apps on a Mac, but there's no touch on those Macs. So everybody thought they would never do that, and then look, they did it. So, I think one question would be, how do you work out the file sharing between the iOS apps and any Mac apps that you are running? But they've kind of already, worked that out for running iOS apps on a Mac. So seems like that's not insurmountable. Also, the iOS is a lot stricter about apps running in the background. Mac apps expect to do that, so you'd have to work that out somewhere. But maybe we'll see it at WWDC. They do have these awfully capable machines that, and I know, hopefully someday in the near future, I'll be able to travel again. And, when I was doing that before, I was taking an iPad and a MacBook, because there's just a few things that I do that I have to have the Mac. But it would be really nice to be able to just take the iPad and only, not have to take the MacBook anymore. So that's basically my thoughts on it. So I don't know if anybody else has any.
Well, I hate to feed into it, Jim, too much because I believe it was just like this past week. After the weeks fly by so quick. I think Greg Joswiak did an interview and basically said, "No, we are not merging the two OSs."
Until they do.
Well, but if you listen carefully to that, he said, "We are not merging the two OSs." That doesn't mean they couldn't expand the two OSs to have very similar or even identical capabilities. So, there's a hair to be split there. And you know how Apple can be about splitting hairs. So it may not be a misrepresentation. It just may be that, it's not there yet. But that's just my theory.
Well,
So
I mean, you've got iOS apps running on the Mac. You've got something that they claim they would never do. You can now use mice and trackpads and all the rest of that on an iPad. So, and now iPads are running with the latest Mac related or the latest Mac processor with the M1. There's absolutely, at this point, there's no reason why you couldn't run the Mac OS on an iPad, other than the fact that right now Apple won't let you do it. The hardware is there. The hardware is ready to go.
One of the things that I think Apple's done to their favor here, I'm just playing around with some apps and trying to get them to work together on Mac OS. One of the things you hear a lot about is sandboxing. And it's great because, as Jim mentioned, on iOS, sandboxing has to happen. It's a thing. There are no options other than that. So I feel like this is a great opportunity for Apple to encourage people to move into the Mac App Store, the iOS App Store, to say, hey, your apps, if using Swift, if in our stores, we can provide some functionality that means, hey, we've been working on things like Sidecar. We've been working on, as Jim said, people have been using VNC since forever, since before iPads. So I feel like there's a way to run this as a feature and not a re-implementation or let's merge the two things. It could be, hey, before you could use Sidecar as a VNC or as a second screen for your Mac. Now, as long as that app is in the App Store, you are running the Mac app on your iPad. And it's that.
I wouldn't be very happy if it was only apps in the Mac App Store.
I think they have to, without providing a way for people to break through the sandbox on iOS, right, which they've been pretty adamant about not doing. I feel like that just makes it the easiest way to do it, is to say like, hey, every app that gets downloaded through the App Store has a signature. It's verified by Apple. It's good to go. So you can say, oh yeah, this app, no, that works perfectly fine. Oh, it has TouchKit involved or whatever, whatever they would develop to make sure that these run somewhat smoothly. And again, it's never going to be a thing that they force people to do, but it is a nice add-on. And I think that the only way Apple would want to do that is if there was some control on their end as to what experience they could ensure and provide by doing that.
I'm imagining that the macOS apps would run in a container like Docker or, VMware. So that whole container would be sandboxed. So it wouldn't need to, wouldn't be able to get out into the iOS underpinnings. But the Mac OS apps wouldn't have to be sandboxed. They'd be limited by the fact of the container they're running in. I mean, that's totally, that's how, virtual machines and Docker, instances and stuff, that's how they work. Those apps have no knowledge of the outside system and no way to get at it. So that way, as soon as you swiped away, then those even when you're running it, they wouldn't be able to get at the iOS part of the system.
I think you're all making it too complicated. iPad OS would essentially go away, and it would be replaced with the Mac OS on the iPad, and it becomes the touch Mac that so many people have wanted.
Except I think, as Jay was pointing out, they're not going to want to do that because that means getting rid of the sandbox and, essentially now
it becomes a Mac.
I think
that'd be great. I'd
yeah.
love that. I'll buy that in a second. I don't think Apple's ever going to do that.
I think
so
if
excited
Apple
to get
were-
my Surface Mac.
If they were starting today, I don't think Apple would allow you to build apps that allowed you to break outside the sandbox on Mac.
No.
If they were, Apple today would not allow for unsandboxed applications at all. So I don't see them providing that as a feature for another device.
Well, think of it this way. Right now, each time the OS is updated, the way that people can get apps onto the Mac becomes more and more restricted. There's more restrictions all the time on using outside applications on the Mac. And at the same time, with iPad OS, you have a general expanding of the way that operates. It's separating itself more and more from iOS all the time. And I think at some point, iPad OS and the Mac OS are likely to merge, and we will have a touchpad Mac, and we will still have our desktop Macs, and we will still have all the things that we currently have now. And eventually, we probably will have a strictly sandboxed environment for the Mac, but it'll be set up in such a way that the rules and restrictions in regards to how applications interact with the hardware will have to be loosened up somewhat in order for it to make everybody happy, so that all the people that like you think about all the problems that Rogue Amoeba had with trying to get things like loopback and their ACE component, audio capture engine, to work with the latest version of the Mac OS. They worked it out. They made it happen. And Apple, seeing that there are avenues for expansion to allow for certain applications to tie into certain hardware processes, it's the best of both worlds. So people get the touchscreen Macs that they want, so that they don't have to carry. And I know this sounds ridiculous when you have laptops that are as light as they are today, but they don't necessarily have to carry a large laptop with a keyboard and all the rest of that if they can control all of their basic Mac applications through touchscreen.
Today's Mac Voices is supported by Headspace. Meditation made simple. Headspace's approach to mindfulness can reduce stress, improve sleep, boost focus, and increase your overall sense of well-being. How do they do all that? Through their easy-to-use app, you can access a variety of mindful meditations. Those can be as short as a quick 3-minute SOS meditation to something much more elaborate. I've really appreciated their approach to meditation. Like you, I'm busy and can find it difficult to set aside time to take care of myself, especially if it involves lengthy rituals or study. Headspace solves that problem by giving me a practical, efficient approach to meditation. Fire up the app, select from the guided meditations or videos, and you're on your way to a better you. I find that, unlike things I've tried in the past, I look forward to a little Headspace time. Headspace is also one of the only meditation apps that is advancing the field of mindfulness and meditation through clinically validated research. Backed by 25 published studies and with over 60 million downloads and 600,000 5-star reviews, you can be assured that Headspace should be your choice for getting started or restarted with meditation as part of your routine. You deserve to feel happier, and Headspace is meditation made simple. Go to headspace.com/MacVoices. That's headspace.com/MacVoices for a free 1-month trial with access to Headspace's full library of meditations for every situation. That's the best deal offered right now, so head over to headspace.com/MacVoices today. Thanks to Headspace for their support of Mac Voices. I want to make sure we introduce Frank Petrie. He came in just a couple minutes after we did the intros. So, Frank, good to have you as always. We'll get you into the discussion. Yeah, we'll get you into the discussion here in a minute. But let's see. Who did I have? I'm losing track of who was next.
I think Jeff is next.
I think it was Jeff is. Yes. Jeff, you have thoughts, which is always exciting.
So I love where Jim and Guy are going with the whole Mac apps on iPad thing, and I'll call it the hybrid Mac, where it's Mac and iPad all in one. And I don't see it happening, at least not for a long time. And when that finally does happen, it's going to be a different thing anyhow, because Apple's always evolving and coming with new products. The idea that Apple has iPads running Mac OS in their labs, to me, is completely plausible. There's no way they don't have that happening. But I don't see Apple giving us that hybrid system, and in part because they have already built their gated wall around the App Store for iOS. And they are not going to punch a hole in that. So their solution is going to be, or we're already seeing, universal apps. So Apple will expect you to make an app that can run equally well on iPad and a Mac, and it will be required to have the correct interface elements for each of those platforms. And that's what their solution is going to be. At least I think that's what their solution is going to be. And the big problem that we're seeing people complain about right now is, hey, we have this professional level touch computer in the brand new iPad Pro, but we don't see the software that really supports that. Well, that's true, but there are many professional level apps for the iPad right now. I do all my video editing in LumaFusion. I'm using OmniFocus on my iPad Pro and OmniOutliner on my iPad Pro. And so those are just three right there off the top of my head on my iPad. And I know that we could probably sit here and come up with a long list of other Pro apps. But what people want to see are things like Final Cut Pro. And what Apple needs to do is take all of their Pro level apps and make them run natively on the M1 iPad Pro. And it wouldn't surprise me if they're already doing that in their labs, and we will see these get released at some point in the near future. I really think giving us the M1 iPad Pro right now is a setup for WWDC announcements. And developers will have this new iPad in hand by the time WWDC rolls around. So when Apple makes their big announcement of what developers can do with it, they will already have the device in hand, at least some of them will, and can start working on these new products right away. And I think this fall and next year are going to be really interesting in the Apple ecosystem, because we're going to see a lot of professional level software that previously wasn't available for the iPad coming to the iPad.
Jeff, the only thing you said there, first of all, I love the idea that you're the first I've heard point out that Apple has built the walled garden and they're not about to punch a hole in it, because I think that's an absolute truth. Because right now, I know at least a few members of this panel, and maybe everybody, would say for some less than technical user, yes, buy an iPad because it'll do everything you need it to do, and it's a lot less prone to security issues. So I love that. The one thing though that, okay, so you've got some apps right now. Nobody has an M1 iPad in their hand yet. And so, is it a surprise to anyone that we don't have pro level apps? I mean, we've had a lot of power before, but nothing like the M1 is going to bring to it. So just give it time, people, and then complain about it. Andrew, I want to get you. Oh, sorry, Jeff, go ahead. I'll let you follow
real quick. And Jim, your head nodding is completely appropriate, because the iPad prior to the M1, the iPad Pro that's currently available today, is a pro level machine. And there's no reason why we couldn't have seen more pro level apps available for the iPad than we currently have. I think switching to the M1 processor is going to change that mindset, and we will see more companies start to work on their M1 compatible Pro apps. And Jim's shaking his head. Jim, I want you to be wrong so bad, and I want me to be right so bad, because it would be awesome for users.
The M1 is not going to make the slightest difference as far as developing Pro apps. The processor, that doesn't matter at all to developers.
I think the thing Jeff said was mindset, though.
No. I'm an AppKit developer. Okay, nothing about the M1 is going to make it easier to port an AppKit app to UIKit. It's a huge, gigantic job. Changing the processor, it makes no difference. I don't care what the processor is. That's taken care of by the compiler. Look, we just changed from Intel to ARM. Notice developers barely noticed. Okay, so changing from one kind of ARM to another kind of ARM isn't gonna make any difference. What makes a difference is the APIs. Look at Xcode. Probably 1 million lines of code, and it's all written using AppKit. The only way to change that to make it run on UIKit, which is what iOS is to rewrite it. The other problem is the whole user interface metaphor. Like, okay, let's say you made a Final Cut or Xcode or whatever but now you no longer have multiple windows. The Mac enables this whole paradigm of really easily switching back and doing something here. Then I'm doing this right now. I've got Zoom. I've got Chrome running the YouTube channel so I can see the chat. I've got the Slack running, and I could just they're all sort of poking out, and I can just. You can't do that on the iPad. So it's not just a question of whether the apps run. The Mac is really a whole different paradigm about being able to use multiple things together and make more out of things more than the sum of their parts.
If only you could plug in an iPad to a larger monitor, like I was talking about 2 weeks ago.
But it's not just the monitor. It gives you a bigger screen. You can have multiple windows. It's the Mac OS. Right, but that would be Mac OS. Then UIKit doesn't allow, enable that. The iPad, the iOS, that's not how it works. iOS is like at most 2 side by side. And not too many people even use. I don't use that. I'm a developer, and whenever I accidentally get 2, I'm like, how do I get rid of that? Because it's just too. But that's on the Mac. I've got like 15 apps running right now, or something like that. But anyway, the point is that the processor it doesn't really. That's not, from a developer's point of view, that's not a game changer. What they want to know about is APIs, and and there's no shortcut to that. There's no like magical, take apps. Well, if there was, then we could take Windows apps and magically make them run on Macs or on iOS or whatever. And people try and do that. Swift UI is an attempt at doing that, and maybe in 10 years, Swift UI will replace everything. But there's not like some magical announcement that Apple can announce next month that will suddenly magically make it easier to port apps written for the Mac to iOS. That's just that Apple's smart, but that's just magic.
Jim, yeah, you're totally right. It's magic. What I think is going to happen, though, is that Apple's going to announce that they've done the hard work of, or at least I hope they announce, they've done the hard work of taking their pro-level apps and making iPad native versions of those. And hopefully we'll see more developers following suit, because this is a pro-level machine. And the complaint that we don't have a lot of pro-level apps for it is totally valid.
I want to get Andrew in here because Andrew he suggested a topic that feels like it crosses over with this a little bit. Andrew, you said that you have gotten an M1 Mac, but you keep going back to your iPad. And I find that really, really intriguing, that you prefer the iPad for what you do, it sounds like, over the Mac. I don't want to overstate it, so I'll let you take it.
I mean, there are a couple of different, I think, reasons I have for doing that. But what I wanted to do is just take a moment, and to me, it sounds like there are a couple of different arguments that people are having in this space. There are some people who are saying we should put Mac OS on the iPad. There are other people who are saying we should keep iPad OS, but put Mac apps on top of that. And I personally don't think that Mac OS is ever going to be on the iPad. I think Apple is going to keep them as separate systems. But Chuck, you mentioned earlier that interview with Greg Joswiak and what's his name, John Turnus. I wrote an article about that, and I have it up here right now. Just this quote that I really loved, and I'm paraphrasing, but they were talking about how there's this complaint that the iPad is too powerful for its own good. And they say that, the iPad has always had the latest Apple silicon, whether that is the A series chips or now it's the M1 chip. And they say that, the power has to come first to give developers the room that they need to build more capable apps that could take advantage of that power. And reading into that, I think it sounds like maybe Mac apps on top of iPad OS seems more likely. But since they're all running M1 now, like what even is a Mac app anymore? Like Jim was saying, on the Mac, you can have, there's stuff going on in the background. You can have multiple apps open at once. But I think in some instances, the lines are blurring. But otherwise, to me, I think ultimately the platforms will be separate.
But you prefer the iPad, which intrigues me because I would think that you I have constantly I don't know how many apps open, plus a lot of little utilities that just make my life easier for the different things I do. A lot of those just simply aren't available on the iPad, nor would it make sense for them to be because I'm not doing the things on my iPad that they make easier. So I see them as almost two different platforms, compatible and certainly complementary, but still two different platforms, two different devices.
For me, I definitely do love the touchscreen. I think it's just immediately accessible. You can just get right in there and start doing whatever you need to do. Another part of it is that I rely a large part on shortcuts, and that is not available on the Mac. I know we have Automator. I know, I'm sure you could replicate a lot of what Shortcuts does with programming and stuff like that. I don't have that type of knowledge. And so I think Shortcuts is easily accessible for a wide range of people. And there are just so many things that I'm doing with the iPad now because of Shortcuts that I can't do on the Mac.
Yeah, that's a glaring omission. How can Shortcuts not be on the Mac yet?
It's going to be hard.
Yeah,
and it's going to be hard because
it
uses APIs that don't exist on the Mac right now.
Yeah.
And the way that a lot of the third parties integrate with it, they're using APIs that are only on iOS. And you need those in place. In addition to the URL schemes, which also don't work the same way on a Mac, you need all of those in place for it to do anything other than what's natively available. But yes, I dream of the world where my Mac has the same set of shortcuts that do the same things as all my other devices. And that will be glorious and wonderful. And optimistic we will see that in its fullness in 3 years. Some version, sure, but in its full greatness, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Mac is slower to adopt everything. And I mean developers on Mac too.
Yeah, if only Apple had access to what was being done with shortcuts so that they could have been working on this for years already to figure out how to bring it to Mac OS. If only.
Or if they telegraphed any of those APIs, maybe getting some use. I mean, if you notice the things that Siri recommends on your iOS device, there's no version of that on your Mac, not your M1 either. It doesn't say, would you like to text so-and-so right now? It doesn't do that.
No.
And that's the API call. That's one of them that Shortcuts relies on.
The topic of running Mac apps on the iPad was a lot more complex than I thought. And I really thought this discussion would go on for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Instead, it went on a lot longer as the panel dug into all kind of different angles, the consumer angle, the developer angle, and the technical angle. They talked about what their preferred platform is and why this would make their lives easier, and some of the things that aren't available on other platforms. So we're going to continue this in the next edition of Mac Voices, and I hope you will join us. Until then, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with Mac Voices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.